So the Nintendo Switch 2 has possibly done quite literally the impossible when it comes to systems. And I know that's something that we've talked about before with certain aspects, but in this sense, it actually quite did that, considering they were able to actually provide enough stock to break this record that we're going to talk about, and how much they did in the volume of time completely slapped down everything that people were trying to say about the system beforehand without actually knowing the base of people that are actually buying the system. So we're going to talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 breaking an actual sales record overall, not just for Nintendo, but overall when it comes to the amount of systems sold. We're going to get into that, plus a massive, huge game with the Splatoon spin-off. We've got a brand new Splatoon game that we need to talk about, in addition to an update and the future of Splatoon with Splatoon 4. Nintendo has put out some pretty big things here that raises some eyebrows, but then also shows that Nintendo is not done when it comes to 2025 and big announcements. Plus, we've got a confirmation when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 power and where it falls in line, because there's been a lot of talk and discussion about exactly where is it at, PlayStation 4 or a bit higher. Well, we've got some more clarification on that now. Plus, a Nintendo Switch 2 giveaway. Yeah, stay tuned. We got a lot to go over. So let's go ahead and start off with the big news here that everyone is talking about on Twitter. It is setting the industry ablaze right now, and that is Nintendo of America putting out this tweet at 7:05 p.m. on June 10th, 2025, that as of the time that I'm recording this video has over 2 million views. So it says this: Nintendo Switch 2 has sold over 3.5 million units worldwide in its first 4 days, becoming the fastest selling Nintendo hardware ever globally. And Nintendo is actually being very modest here when it says that. We're going to get into the specifics of it, but they're being a bit modest because, while yes, that's technically correct, it's the fastest selling Nintendo hardware ever globally, it's actually the fastest selling hardware for dedicated consoles globally ever. Now, Daniel Ahmed put this out there as well, and he quote tweeted the Japanese announcement saying, "We posted the news release. Nintendo Switch 2 sells over 3.5 million units worldwide in first 4 days." That's what it says on the Nintendo Japanese corporate site. But then Daniel Ahmed quote tweeted that and says, "This makes it not just the best selling Nintendo console in the first 4 days, but the fastest selling home video game console of all time." Follows that up by saying, "For reference, it took the PS4 2 weeks to sell 2.1 million units and 6 weeks to sell 4.2 million units. It took the PS5 7 weeks to sell through 4.4 million units, but also with the caveat that the PS5 in particular was heavily supply constrained. So if it didn't have those supply constraints, it probably would have done better." But either way, the Nintendo Switch 2 here has absolutely shattered the record, because the PS4 was the previous record. PS4 and PS5 were pretty much the previous records. But now at this point, the Nintendo Switch 2 has done two things that people felt was impossible. One, be able to actually surpass the other systems that they've had before, because some people felt the price was too high for what you're getting. Obviously, people disagreed with that considering the sales numbers here. But also, two, have enough supply to actually beat that. It's one thing to be able to sell to people that want it, clearly, but to actually have the stock there at launch from all the fans, that's a really hard thing to do, and Nintendo was able to do the impossible and actually supply enough of that. Now, as of this point, that supply is running pretty dry. There are some reports that there are some Nintendo Switch 2 systems in certain places, but I've gotten a ton of people telling me that there are no Nintendo Switch 2s in their local area. They went to go buy one and they cannot find one now at this point. So over the weekend, you could find some here and there, but by the week start, it looks like there's not any more left in a lot of places. Now, I did check it out myself at my Best Buy and Walmart, and I've checked out my Best Buy, and they had the sign up out of stock. When you first walk into the store, it's right there. I went back and looked, there was no more. Then I went and looked, I think, at the end of the weekend last week, and I did see about 6 systems. So I thought, let me check it out again, because I was going there to pick up a video game, and there was nothing there. It was cleaned out. So I think that this system is definitely going to have a very high sales trajectory. I had it selling 100 million units or right around there, maybe even a bit above, Depending on how long Nintendo supports this system and what games come out for it, that's obviously variable overall, but I felt that it has a very good chance of being a 100 million plus seller system because it's following up the great Nintendo Switch 1. It's got fantastic backwards compatibility that improves things, and it does everything for the most part. It's not perfect. I want to make sure that I say that. Game key cards, $80 Mario Kart, there's some other things here and there, but it does everything that most people wanted from the Nintendo Switch 1. You don't bite the hand that feeds you overall, and there was no reason for them to make some type of drastically different or super gimmicky type of system past the Nintendo Switch 1. Add some quirks in there. You've got mouse mode. You've got a couple other things in there when it comes to the hardware overall. You've got the magnetic strips. You've got some pretty cool stuff in there, but make what people like. And then you can make the gimmick stuff when it comes to the software like Ring Fit Adventure or Nintendo Switch Sports or stuff like that. And Nintendo did it. They executed and they nailed it at this point, and I think that's the reason why the Nintendo Switch 2 is selling so well, despite people online saying otherwise. Now, the thing about that, and I want to make sure that I just say this real briefly before we get into the next thing, people online, a lot of people that were saying that it was going to fail or flop at the beginning were people who don't like Nintendo or don't like the Nintendo Switch 1. If you ask a lot of these people what do they play, a lot of them didn't like it. Maybe they have the Switch 1, but they didn't play the games. The actual fans of the Switch 1, they're ecstatic about the backwards compatibility, the improvements to that, the game lineup of having Mario Kart World, then having Donkey Kong, having Pokemon Legends ZA, having Metroid Prime. They want that consistent flow of games. That is how a Nintendo system does well. That is what the Nintendo Switch 1 did well. Breath of the Wild right there at launch, not much else after that, but then right after you had Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, right after that you had ARMS, you had Splatoon, you had a consistent flow of games, so you're not overloaded with a bunch of different games. A lot of people who don't really like Nintendo systems were saying, oh, well, where's like 5 million games? They want Mario, Zelda, and everything launched right there brand new, and that's just not how it's going to work. A lot of people want to be able to have pacing, and they can't afford everything right there at launch. So it makes sense to space it out so you can consistently have a flow of games, because the Nintendo Switch 1 followed that strategy and it did it really well. Nintendo's doing the same strategy here. So that's why I think that the system is doing so well. The improved backwards compatibility, you get a more powerful system, better screen, better audio, 4K support while docked, upscaled or not, some of them native. You get updates. This is what people were looking for, and that's the reason why it did so well, and that's the reason why I was able to call it doing so well, because I saw what actual Nintendo fans were saying and what they were thinking, and there's millions and millions of more fans that are waiting for the next shipment to get theirs as well. Nate the Hate also adds that we could see up to 5 million or 6 million within the first month or so look out for that, guys. If Nintendo can restock quickly, which I'm hoping that they do, you never want to walk in and have it completely sold out. You want to have low stock where there's consistently a flow. But for right now, considering how much they shipped out, having 3.5 million and beating out the rest of the systems by a considerable amount, even though there were some supply constraints, is definitely a good thing going forward, because Nintendo's going to need those sales to entice more third-party developers to make sure that they're putting their games on the Nintendo Switch 2, as it's not a x86 system for easier ports like the Xbox Series, for example, compared to the PlayStation 5 or PC. So you're going to need those sales and then enticement from developers feeling confident that Nintendo can sell the system, that improves their chances of their game selling well, because the more people that have the system, the more potential buyers for the game. So it's all good there. But what's also all good is all of you guys that are not subscribing to the channel, subscribing to the channel for our Nintendo Switch 2 giveaway. So if you can't find one, you can win one right here on PlayerEssence. The giveaway is running from now at this point to June 16th, and we're going to be giving away a Nintendo Switch 2. All you've got to do is check out the link in the description below, head over to the community page, vote on the poll, and drop a comment there. I'll be picking a winner on June 16th. So hit that subscribe button, drop a comment below, let me know what your favorite aspect about the Nintendo Switch 2 is, and good luck to everyone entering in. Now let's go ahead and jump right into the next topic here, guys. We're going to talk about this big announcement of Splatoon. We've got Splatoon news bursting out of the seams, Splatoon Raiders, and I think this leads to another massive thing that we have to talk about, and potentially, once again, Nintendo doing some impossible things that many people felt that they couldn't do when it comes to a first 6 months to year lineup. So Splatoon 3, Splatoon Raiders, we've got big updates across the board. So Nintendo's announced Splatoon Raiders. This is the first ever Splatoon spin-off game for exclusively the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, there was no release date announced, but that has me thinking, a lot of people talk about Nintendo Direct, that direct is coming. And not only is that direct coming, but they're going to give more information soon on Splatoon Raiders, in addition to other big games as well. Another reason why I think that direct is coming soon, and this game, Splatoon Raiders, is going to get a release date soon, is that it's already been rated in certain places as well. So since the rating is there, I think it's definitely happening. Plus, we've got a big update for Splatoon 3, along with the version 10.0 for Switch 1 and for Switch 2. But if you're playing on Switch 2 on June 12th, so very soon as the time that I'm recording this video, you're going to be able to download an update, and that update's going to get you improvements in frame rate in certain places. It's going to get you visual improvements. It's going to get you faster loading times, and it's going to get you a better overall experience on the Nintendo Switch 2 system. Plus, with that 10.0 update, there's a bunch of new weapons and different stuff that they're adding in. Even the returning stage from the original Splatoon game, Urchin Underpass, one of my favorites, that's coming back as well. There's a bunch of stuff that they've tweaked with the freshness caps. Players can earn new in-game badges. They've added some new stuff for the Anarchy Battle Series. They have these weapon power. Like, there's so many different things that they've added into the mix here when it comes down to it. I love that even multiple years later now, Splatoon 3 came out in 2022. We're in 2025. 3 years later, there's still some awesome stuff happening, and they're still updating Nintendo Switch 1 games for the Nintendo Switch 2. Some thought that Nintendo might not update games after the first initial 12. No, that's not the case. We're going to still get big updates overall, so that's very exciting. So I'm definitely going to jump back into Splatoon 3, especially with this update looking and running better. I love that it's going to be 60 frames per second in all areas, the Splatsville and all of that, instead of the 30 that it does. So that's going to be great. I'm pretty sure it's going to faster loading and all sorts of stuff. So I cannot wait to hop back in and see all of the updates and new weapons and things like that. But we've got to spend a little bit more time on this Splatoon Raiders game as well, because this looks like it's going to be pretty cool, because you play the role of a mechanic and players will go on an adventure in a mysterious Spirulite Islands alongside the Splatacular Deep Cut Trio. And you can tell just by looking at it, the visuals have been improved greatly. The sharpness, the textures, what they're doing with the game is improved so much from Splatoon 3 and Splatoon 2 on the Nintendo Switch 1. So I love the style. I mean, it's still that same Splatoon style overall graphics wise, so it's going to look similar in that sense, but you can just tell this was built for the Nintendo Switch 2 overall. So I cannot wait to see what you do. It does seem like this is going to be a single player survival adventure shooting type of game where you go out and kind of scavenge some resources, come back, build your base, and kind of build back up to not only hunt treasure and get different things, but also find a way off of the island as well. So I'm loving what they're doing here. And once again, proves that Nintendo, they are going to have surprise announcements. They're going to have new games out of nowhere. They're going to do things when it comes down to it. What they've announced for this year, I don't think they're quite done, man. I don't know when this game is coming out, but I do think that it's going to be 2025 based off of the game being rated and based off of the fact that they already announced it. Usually Nintendo wants to announce games very close to the release, with some few exceptions here and there unless something gets delayed. But most of the time when they announce a game, they want it to come out sometime within that first 5-6 months or so. They do not want to wait real long for it, especially for a spin-off game. I think this will set up Splatoon 4 as well. I'm guessing that Nintendo is hard at work on Splatoon 4, and maybe we get an announcement of Splatoon 4 sometime next year for a release next year, because they want to have Splatoon out early in the life of a new platform. But they did give us this update to kind of bide the time a bit before we get to Splatoon 4. So I think that's what they were trying to do there. They also confirmed that there's going to be crossplay for Splatoon 3 when it comes to Nintendo Switch 1 and Nintendo Switch 2 owners. So keep that in mind as well when you're deciding when, where, how to play the game. But yeah, very excited about all of this for Splatoon news. Big Splatoon fan myself, so I can't wait to check out this brand new game, Splatoon Raiders, which I do think could be dropping in 2025. And of course, the update that's dropping on June 12th for Splatoon 3 10.0. So what do you guys think about all of this information here? Let me know in the comment section below. But now we're going to move on to what Koei Tecmo had to say about the Nintendo Switch 2 and the power, which has been an ongoing discussion when it comes to what Digital Foundry said and what fans are saying, where a lot of people online are saying it's more closer to the PS4. Digital Foundry said it's more in line with the PS4, whereas other people are saying, well, wait a minute, no, based off the games, it's more in line with the Xbox Series S. So let's get into what Koei Tecmo had to say in a recent interview with WCCF Tech. This is Koei Tecmo, Wild Hearts producer Takuto Edogawa, and he said this in response to this question. In terms of raw computing power, Is it closer to the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox Series S? And they're talking about the Nintendo Switch 2. That's the question. And then here is his answer. There are a lot of characteristics when it comes to raw computing power, so it's difficult to generalize, but I think it can be thought as closer to the Series S. So that is a loaded statement in terms of what he has to say. But I think ultimately, in terms of the TLDR, it is a good step above PS4, PS4 Pro. When it comes down to it, if it's closer to the Xbox Series S, we're talking about GPU, CPU side, but he said that there's a lot of characteristics. You have the ARM architecture, you have low watts when it comes to that versus x86. You have DLSS. You have a number of different things. Obviously, more RAM, different type of RAM. PS4, that is a hard disk drive. That's slower. Nintendo Switch 2 uses faster memory, way better when it comes to certain stuff. So you got to look at it from an overall scope. And if you look at it from an overall scope, because of those characteristics, it is hard to generalize. But overall, everything, he states that it's more closer to Series S, which that does line up with the games that we've seen. If you look at something like Cyberpunk 2077, more in line with being better than the PS4 and the PS4 Pro, than being in line with just like the base PS4. If it was just base PS4 power, it would look kind of more similar to that, but Cyberpunk 2077 definitely looks a step above PS4 and even PS4 Pro, and even better in some sense when it comes to Xbox Series S, but the frame rate isn't quite what the Xbox Series S can do at targeting 60 frames, where the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be 30 or 40 frames in a performance mode, but it's definitely better than the PS4, PS4 Pro from what we've seen so far from the games. Street Fighter was also like that, Street Fighter 6, that game's on PS4. The Switch 2 version looks better than PS4, actually looks better than Xbox Series S in a lot of sense as well. Stuff like Yakuza 0, that's also on PS4. The Switch 2 version is spec'd better as well. So that's just his opinion, that's his thoughts, but he does make games. And of course, Wild Hearts S is out right now on the Nintendo Switch 2. So if you want to pick up a Monster Hunter type of game, check out Wild Hearts S on the Nintendo Switch 2. Actually looks pretty good graphically on the system running as well. But what do you guys think about everything that we discussed here, from the Nintendo Switch 2 massive sales to the new Splatoon game updates and what could be announced, big games at a Nintendo Direct or more? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.